Do you find it hard to explain to friends and family what you now do? Are you wasting valuable time by attempting to figure out challenges on your own? We have created a community for ex-corporate people running their own business who want to live a life they love whilst giving back to their community. This is the Build, Live, Give show. We bring you first-hand experiences of guests going through many of the struggles you face each and every day. We get real with no corporate BS. And now your host, Paul Higgins.
Welcome to the Build, Live, Give show. I'm Paul Higgins and I'm your show host. And today we have David Clarke from InLife Independent Living. David started his social responsibility or social consciousness from a very early age. He used to drive around in a combi van with his family and they were always thinking about how they could make a greater impact. But he went off and got a steady job in a fantastic management consulting company, BCG, where he worked there for 15 years. But he realised that it was impacting Joanna, his wife, and their 3 children just by the amount of hours that he worked. So he decided to leave and he did a little bit of independent consulting until he formed his own not-for-profit. And he just talks about how that is making a really positive impact upon the lives of some great Australians. He talks about the NDIS and he also talks about some of the challenges of providing services and who do you provide service to and who doesn't. It's a brilliant podcast, so I recommend you get your pens and paper ready because David does give a lot of actionable advice. So what's happening in the community? It continues to grow. So thanks for those that have joined us at buildlivegive.com. We're really set up for people that have left corporate, they're running their own business, they want to live a great life and they want to give back. And David's a brilliant example of that. There's also some other fantastic podcasts that you can listen. So please subscribe, whether it's on Stitcher or iTunes. And also we'd love to get your 5-star reviews. If you love the podcast, please leave us a 5-star review. So what I'm going to do now is hand you over to David Clarke from InLife Independent Living. But before we dive into today's show, leaving corporate to run your own business can be extremely hard and lonely. You start off in a euphoric state and at some point you look at your cash flow and start to doubt your abilities. What you learn in corporate doesn't always translate and you are bombarded every day with new challenges. Learning something yourself is okay, but it can be both timely and costly. Friends and family want to help, but they don't have the specific experiences you need. This is why we created the Build, Live, Give community, a free community with hundreds of people just like you answering questions and sharing real experiences, and definitely no spam. This, coupled with weekly interviews on hot topics, will help you expedite success. Search for the Build, Live, Give group in Facebook and answer the 3 questions to gain access. Anyway, enough from me. Now it's time to hand you over to one of the BLG members to hear their wonderful journey. Welcome, David Clarke from InLife Independent Living to the Build, Live, Give podcast. So, David, we're going to get to know a lot about your fantastic background and your career and what you're doing now with InLife Independent Living. But why don't you start with just a little bit of a backstory for the BLG audience?
Sure, Paul. Thanks for having me on. Look, my background is I was a generalist at university. I did an art science degree and wasn't really sure what I wanted to do, and kind of fell into consulting, which was kind of ideal. I was worried about people who go into consulting and strategy consulting because they want to, because how can you really know what it's about? No one ever really knows what strategy consultants do. Yes. So I fell into it, but had a ball. It was a bit like kind of applied university, I suppose. So I was there with the Boston Consulting Group. I was straight out of university and start a role there. I always had a bit of a social enterprise leaning, a bit of a social conscience. I always say that my folks drove us around when I was young in a yellow combi van with solar not nuclear stickers on the back of the car. So I didn't have much chance, I suppose. So I did a bit of non-profit work along the way. I worked in one of the international aid agencies, Care International. It's like Oxfam and Save the Children, one of those ones. And then I worked for an Indigenous organisation up in Cape York for a number of years. I had a ball up there doing economic development work with Noel Pearson and the Cape York institutions. Went back to BCG and I fell into the public sector practice. And I suppose after a number of years of that, the consulting lifestyle just got a bit much, as often happens. I've got 3 young kids now and was looking for a change. And in the course of my work, I had come across the National Disability Insurance Scheme and did a bit of work on that. And there's this big change going on in the disability sector where there's a lot more money going into the sector, and the way services are delivered is completely changing. It's transforming the sector 100%. So I decided, with all my background, I thought I'd be a good one to try something new and start up a service to deliver outcomes under the National Disability Insurance Scheme.
Great, and I'll ask you a question in a moment, a little bit outside work, but I heard an interview the other day around NDIS and saying that I think most Australians, and I'll certainly put myself in the situation, it's like, fantastic, it's gone through, so therefore, we don't really have to worry about that as much. We can go on to other things. I know that's a general comment, but someone said that there's still only about 10% of people with disabilities that actually will benefit from the NDIS, and I just wondered what your view on that is.
Yeah, it's a very good point. It's really meant for the people with the most profound and permanent disabilities only. So you think about somebody who's quadriplegic or has a very serious, perhaps an intellectual acquired brain injury from a car accident. It's those kind of people who are covered by the scheme. So even someone who is perhaps a paraplegic or has a what wouldn't be classed as a profound disability is actually not covered by the scheme. To put some numbers on it, there's about 460,000 people are expected to be covered by the scheme, but I think more than 2 million people in Australia identify as having one. It also only covers certain aspects of caring and support for people with disability. It's a bit like aged care in some way. It provides the tasks of daily living. And there are all sorts of other aspects around accessing education and employment opportunities and just being engaged in the community that we need to work on as a society that's over and above the NDIS. So it's certainly a really important thing to get right, but it's absolutely only part of the puzzle.
Yeah, brilliant. And look, I'm sure we'll learn a little bit more as we go through, but that question about outside of work. So what's something that a friend or family member would know about you, David, that the BLG audience wouldn't?
Yeah, in terms of my work, we're pretty close. There's not too many secrets between my work and between that and family. But one thing I do know is that I'm good with making a cocktail.
Oh, right.
So, yeah. So I used to, when I was in my 20s, hold a whole bunch of cocktail parties, and we just opened up these bunch of cocktail books and make anything from it. But these days I stick to the classics, like make a bit of a mean margarita or a Negroni is my choice these days.
Fantastic. Well, I think it's great to be able to make them at home because certainly went out last week and my wife ordered a cocktail and I nearly had to take out a second mortgage.
Oh my God!
Yeah, they're certainly shooting up now in bars in Melbourne. And if you sort of go back to when you did decide to leave, was there anything at all that was sort of holding you back, or what sort of take me to the moment that you thought, yeah, you know what, I actually am going to make this step?
Yeah, look, I had I'd done a couple of micro businesses, I suppose you'd call them, in my past. So the idea of starting something up wasn't necessarily all that daunting. But I do have 3 kids right now, and we've got a mortgage. So that it was, I suppose, the financial risk for our personal finances. Yeah, I'm 40. I was in the late 30s at the time when I was considering it. So that financial risk was probably the thing that was holding me back. And I was talking to a guy, and he was actually a careers consultant helping with the transition out at BCG and just working through all the options with him. And he talked about how passionate I was and could see the opportunity in what I was doing, but also that, why not just take on some independent consulting? And we kind of worked through and found out that just kind of approached a couple of clients with the blessing of my former employer and managed to combine a bit of consulting on the side with starting up the business, which creates its challenges. Of course, it couldn't focus 100% on the business, but I suppose I was fortunate enough that after a career of a good 10 years at BCG, I was senior enough to be able to charge a decent daily rate, I suppose, that meant that we could cover our living costs while still leaving plenty of time in the week to focus on InLife.
Great. And, it was excellent that you had the help from the outplacement. Was there anybody else that you got help for as you went through that transition?
Yeah, I mean, so the BCG networks are pretty good and are tapping into a whole lot of folks along the way. What I found interesting, I suppose, is I accessed a lot of senior people and to get their advice on how to think about the market and the digital opportunities and the sector in particular. But you get a lot of things thrown your way, and filtering through all the advice to work out what's relevant for you was almost the hardest thing. And then I suppose the other key person that did help crystallise things was my chair. Her name's Wendy Brooks, and she's has a disability herself and has started up her own consulting business. And yeah, it was just a very, very good at kind of crystallising things and helped me go for it and just providing that motivation and encouragement, I think.
Excellent. And if you sort of fast forward to today, which is the build section, just talk a little bit about InLife Independent Living. And if you had to make a speech, or if you walk into a gathering and someone says, "So, David, what do you do, and what does InLife Independent Living do?" How would you answer that?
Yeah, so we're a disability services agency, and we basically designed our model from a blank sheet of paper to work under the NDIS. To avoid all the challenges that organisations who are transitioning from the old world to the new world are facing. So what we do is just offer a great quality service. We pay the people that we employ above award wages. We have a great administrative system in the background. It's online and simple for people to use. And it's a lot more flexible and gives people control. So the service we provide is to go into people's homes and to help with these tasks of daily living. We have a pool of assistants and care workers who go into people's homes, and we just have a modern administration system that sits behind that to enable that to be just a much better experience for people. It's a very personal one, of course. We're talking about showering and toileting and helping you get dressed and maybe helping you with feeding. So you couldn't imagine a more personal service. So to have someone that you can trust and reliable is absolutely essential to our clients' lives.
Yeah, it must be. And as far as, I normally ask people around the business model and who their ideal clients are. I think in your case, that's you've covered that well. As far as how you get new clients, how do you go about that? How do you increase the great service that you provide? How do you increase that?
Yeah, it's quite an established market in many ways, and there's quite an ecosystem of different players. So we work mainly through case managers and support coordinators who advise their clients on which services in the market to use. So they'd be our number one channel, if you like. Yes. As well as word of mouth amongst our existing client pool. We're taking it I wouldn't say easy, but taking it carefully in terms of our growth at the moment. We're still really designing the model and all the systems that sit behind it, and we're not at that stage that we can really get out there and market heavily and deal with a large volume of customers coming our way at any one time. We've got it's quite a different business model in many ways, because this is lifetime care and support that we do. Mm-hmm. So it's once we acquire a customer, they'll be with us for 10, 15, 20 years or more. A good client, as you put it, will often use our services on a daily basis for maybe 4, 5 or more hours a day. And so the numbers on that really add up in terms of the costs and therefore our revenue, and then the amount of investment that we can make and we need to be making up front in order to win their business. So at the moment it's steady as she goes, and I suppose we're increasingly over the next year going to think about marketing and how we can set up the system so that we can take on a greater number of clients at a time.
Great. And what have been some of your the key assumptions that you started when you first launched the business, and what have been some of your key learnings against those assumptions as you've grown it?
I reckon the main one that comes to mind is that when I naively came out of the corporate world and the digital transformations on everyone's minds, that thinking we could be a pure online service and just really people would go onto our website and connect with their carers and do it all online, and it's seamless and doesn't grow a great deal of personal interaction. As I've gone through more and more, I've discovered that we're working with a client base that is not necessarily even online on a regular basis. The challenges of coordinating that care are such that it doesn't necessarily lend itself to someone doing it all themselves. I mean, we're talking about what many people would consider a decent-sized small business, the amount of work we do with some clients. Yes. And so we're actually a much more of a people business than I realised at the time. We're kind of like a professional services firm in some ways in the management team, and the service we provide is these care workers into people's homes. So that's really been a big change in how I've had to think about setting up the business, and also our growth projections, I suppose, as well. That kind of hockey stick growth that you can get from a pure online play is not really realistic, because we've got these, this really is much more of a people business. But having said that, once we acquire a customer, that is an annuity revenue stream that goes on for years. So that's a great foundation for financial stability.
Yeah, and look, a lot of the people in the community, BLG community run services businesses, all different types, and it's a good point you bring up. I know for a lot of people, scope creep is something that is really difficult to manage. So obviously, simple, you quote and then you over deliver and don't recover, and that's something that people always struggle with running a people business. How do you sort of go with that? Because I'm assuming there's people in desperate need of your services. It's a lot more heartfelt than some of the building a website or something else. How do you sort of manage that scope creep and increasing your cost base?
Yeah, it's a good point that we've been grappling with a lot the past few months. We have one of the advantages of the sector in many ways, in thinking of all the challenges of starting up a business, that there's fixed prices in the market at the moment. The government sets the cost of an hour of care. So that helps a lot in reducing the complexity. So we don't face on a unit cost basis those kind of pressures. Where it does come in, though, is the amount of support that each client has. So we're working, I mentioned there's like 460,000 people who are eligible for the NDIS. The costs of the scheme are heavily skewed to the top 10 or 20% of those people, and the other 80% might only have a few hours of support a week that we can earn our revenue from. And we're effectively a margin on a low margin game, right? So the net on top of our direct staff costs is how we make our money to cover our core business. So when it's only a few hours a week, there's just no money. There's just no way we can realistically support that properly. But you start hearing these stories, and people are desperate for a good service provider, and we've got a great story about how we can deliver better quality. So it's actually that conversation about actually turning away possible customers that becomes really hard, because one, that's not easy for anyone to do, right? Last thing you want to be doing is turning customers away, but certainly not when they're facing these challenging circumstances in their life, and you kind of set up your business trying to help that.
Yeah, look, and I sort of sense that that's an ongoing challenge in a way that.
Absolutely. Yeah. I've got some ideas of some models that we can provide a more online type service that doesn't need effectively our full touch model for those people. It won't work for everyone, but at least it'll be an option that we can put out there for those people, because we get the most satisfaction as a team from helping people with the more complex needs, and it's certainly the more, as I said, it's financially, it makes much more sense too. So it's tricky because we need the funnel of lots of people coming our way to catch the ones who really need us and the right people to work with. But turning away 8 or 9 out of 10 customers is just not really a kind of a viable proposition. That doesn't feel like at the moment. So that marketing sales funnel is a thing we're still grappling with, and another reason, because we haven't solved that yet, are taking it slowly.
Yeah, look, and it's often when I run an advisory business for a lot of the club members, it's the exact same thing. And I think really defining that ideal client, understanding their situation and making sure that you're picking the right clients, is something that I know a lot of business people sort of struggle with. And it's a really interesting take on yours, because, like you said, you ultimately got a vision and a mission for helping people, and turning away people must be really difficult. So,
yeah. And look, at the end of the day, we're at the position financially. We've grown to a point where we don't need that. We learnt the hard way those lessons over the past 12 months, I suppose, where we were kind of desperate to grow the client base and would take on ones that just didn't make sense. And and there's other aspects of working with people about their circumstances, and if there's mental health challenges that some people face, it can that created complexities for us as well. So it's been great for our business to get to a point where we have a core amount of revenue and net profit coming in, that we don't need to chase those quite so much, and can really think more carefully about where our client base goes from here.
Yeah, and how much is your management consulting experience and background? How much did that help in getting quickly to where you've got to?
I think, there's so many different skills that you learn as a consultant that it was great. It was fantastic grounding. I suppose anyone, I'm at 15, 20 years background, anyone would have that kind of bit of experience, I suppose, by the time you get to this point. But the strategy that we picked, I think that's one thing that I have thought that we've done. Still think the strategy we've chosen about the way we approach the market is something that I definitely learned from BCG that has helped us a lot. Other things, though, I'll tell you, I've been way out of my depth. We're a service delivery company now, right? Every day we are providing services, completely different model to a project-based consulting. And to go from the corporate world to a consumer service, dealing with a disadvantaged consumer base, and going from where you're working to transform big clients to a startup, it's been a big learning curve for me. But I've enjoyed it. It's been extra rewarding as a result, I have to say.
Brilliant. And who sort of, has there been any particular help that you've received as you've gone through those learnings yourself?
Yeah. It's quite a different business. So there's not like I can tap into former colleagues and get their help. I suppose in my chair is the one who's bridged that gap the most for me. And there are just various advisors that I just tap on and get their perspectives on things, And again, it's a matter of having a framework of understanding your business, and I, kind of understand which bits of that they do and don't understand, and filter some of the thoughts and learnings accordingly. But there's ex-colleagues from BCG that I count in that, and various people in the sector that I've met would be others that I tap on a regular basis as well.
Excellent. And talking about support, so I know, Joanna, your wife has been with you as you've grown this fantastic business. If she was listening today, what would you say about the support she's given you through your growth?
Yeah, well, I suppose I'd have to thank her for even getting to this point, particularly for struggling through all the years with BCG. I suppose it was a very challenging lifestyle there, and this was a good decision for our family to try a new business and start it up, because it has meant to be a bit more grounded and connected with the family as a result. But any business startup, it does consume you 100%. So her support to just be there as a rock the whole way through is it's been phenomenal. And she's very, I'd say to her, she's so generous and perceptive and funny. Just keep me grounded and connected with all my extended family. That I'm a lucky guy, I have to say.
Oh, brilliant! That's great. And look, when I left Coke, I actually did some work for a competitor of yours on some projects, and I just could not believe. I thought, being a director at Coke, I thought our life was pretty crazy and trying to manage diaries, etc. But when I went into the management consulting world, it was just something else. I actually gave up. I was there to teach them how to be more productive, and I just looked and said, look, I don't think you can be in this industry. It's just out of control. I actually left and went and worked in another industry where I think I could add some more value.
10, 15 years to come to my senses. There you go.
Yeah.
Look, I have to say, I had grand visions of becoming a big player in the market in this new industry I'm in now. But I have to say that looking after the well-being of both myself and my team members has become much more of a priority the next 12 months, because there's a lot of challenging issues and stress happens in this industry as well. So if we can be an oasis of good practice both for us and our broader care worker team members as well as clients in this sector, that'll be something I'll be very proud of. And so getting that work-life balance is something that I've been able to work on, and haven't been able to drive that culture way more than what is a very ingrained culture in strategy consulting, let me tell you.
Yes, yeah. Like I said, it really should surprise me. So the next section is around the live section, which is, you've just covered it beautifully on as an overall, but just around some of the daily habits. So what are some of the daily habits you do now in life, independent living, that make you successful?
The caffeine one.
Yes.
I think the flexibility and finding a way to create a bit of space to work on stuff at different times of the day is important. So my kids are up early, so I'm kind of getting up with them because I just wake up now. So finding a way to get a bit of stuff done then, so that I can balance what I need to do on the home front with getting work done as well. So I can get up, do a bit of work, then help get the kids to school. That stuff is important. So the fact that we've got a fully online platform helps amazingly with that.
Yes.
We're very mobile. We're very distributed business too, right? So we're all known for getting out our laptops and firing up our internet connections in our car. And I've done payroll from various cafes around Melbourne over the past year or two. So things like that. The other one I reckon that comes to mind is you got a to-do list that is a mile long and just keeps adding things on, and externalizing that, putting it down on paper so that you don't have to try and keep track of it. That was a big thing for me. And even notes and ideas that pop into your head, I use Evernote to kind of keep track of all of that, and that just helps get a bit of clarity in the thinking to be a bit more productive.
Yes, when I did some work with Franklin Covey, which is a productivity training company, and they talk about a master task list. So if you can have one list as opposed to several, that certainly helps, which is, I suppose, your key point there about getting all things into one spot. Excellent. So obviously, the question I normally ask next is the give section, which is about a cause or a community you're passionate about. I know in the pre-brief, we talked about the fact that you really, your cause is your job, is your not-for-profit, InLife independent living. So that's what you've got all your focus on at the moment. How can, what are some key tips on how people can help in their day-to-day life, help people that may have a disability, or how to, general public like ourselves help more?
Yeah, look, I think people with disabilities do live a very different life. It's not easy to appreciate the extra challenges that people with disability can face. So be open to finding out ways to understand that when you do encounter people with disability in your lives. I mean, everyone does have someone we know. Just about everyone is touched in some way by someone with disability, but take that time to understand it. And I think the other one at the moment is there's a lot of noise about the NDIS and all this stuff about the cost of the scheme and so forth. But I can tell you it is, until now, people with a disability in Australia really had really poor social and economic outcomes, lived a pretty terrible life, to be honest. So because I'm really quite shocked by some of the clients I've met. So take any news about the NDIS with a grain of salt and think positively about how this is a good change for society, and it will in fact it is an insurance scheme that helps all of us as well. So if it does happen to you, God or one of your loved ones, I can tell you right now, you want the NDIS to be a success so that you can get the right kind of care that you might need.
And how do we sit on a global level at the moment, David, versus other countries with a scheme like NDIS? Are we sort of at the top of the pack? If you look at from all the other measures that we have from a economic, etc., how do we go from a disability benchmarking point of view versus other countries?
Yeah, well, that's one of the things that attracted me in the first place to the sector. I mentioned I've got a bit of a social background and trying to from my folks, but and I worked in Aboriginal communities and saw what disadvantage meant and social and economic exclusion, and a lot of those issues actually play out for people with disability as well. There's the job participation is really low, education outcomes are really low, even just personal connections that people have with friends and family are very low in Australia compared to our OECD peers.
Right.
And so it's a big thing for us to try and get right, and that's why this NDIS investment is in place and has attracted me. And I think we do have a long way to go just to get back to middle of the pack on this stuff with our peers. It is an interesting, and that being said, it is a great revolution for social services in general in Australia, because it's actually putting the consumer, the recipient of the service, in charge and the ability to think about how the support that they need is designed rather than being directed by the government and the service providers that are out there. So it's a great time to be involved in this. It's actually quite exciting.
Yeah, look, I can only go from what I observed going through Europe last year. I spent 2 months in Europe, and I was just absolutely horrified at just the basic disability services that we have here in Australia, or seem to have, versus what they have in Europe. A lot of countries seem to be really backward in that area. But that was only what I observed from outside the home. So I don't know what the in-home care is like, but certainly, but then that was the complexity of the fact that a lot of people were actually, families stay together more, whereas it seems in Australia it's family units split. So it was quite an interesting dynamic.
Even another example, even America can be better than us on some measures, particularly around accessibility of the environment. They've got quite strong. It's not known for its social inclusion and social policies, right? But there's great laws around accessibility in the built environment, which is a huge thing for people with disability. So yeah, a lot of work to do.
Fantastic. Look, the last section is around the action section, where you can take all that experience and knowledge that you have and just part some of that wisdom with the BLG listeners. So the first one is around your number one personal productivity tip.
Other than that, that master to-do list, I reckon I'm really getting stuck into Podio, which is this flexible information platform that some of your listeners may have tapped into through your businesses as well, Paul. And I think that the opportunity that presents to design workflows and a system right around the way your business needs to work is really exciting. And I'm a bit of a cheerleader for it now. And every time I think about new ways of extending its capabilities to automate tasks and really clean up our workflows, I think of more and more ways to use it. So that would be my one. Give it a go. It takes a little bit of time to get to know, but it is a very powerful tool in my view.
Excellent. And the other than Podio, what are some of the other apps that you might have in your home screen on your phone or that you use on a desktop?
Yeah, we use an app called Deputy for our employee scheduling. It's a fantastic tool. They're actually Sydney-based and
Yes.
are now really taken on the world. So we interact. We've got 70 plus people and about 20 people doing rostering, and it's a very clean interface that allows people to work with it no matter what their level of computer skills, frankly. So that's a great one. They're now doing scheduling for Qantas and other big businesses, so that's a cool one I use. Workable is another great one for recruiting. And then honestly, for Xero, I find that it's just beautiful for getting all the accounting done. It saves heaps of time for me.
Yeah, that's great. And just as a quick aside, the actual founder of Deputy used to own a soft drink company that's his family had, Shelleys, which was a regional soft drink company that the Coca-Cola company bought. So I actually worked on that brand when I was at Coke. So when I met him, it was it was quite a change.
There you go. They're going global now. A big way to go off in America, and they're doing great things.
Yeah. No, they've got a fantastic company. And next question is podcasts. So podcasts or books or a combination of both. What are some of your favourite listens or reads?
I don't get a whole lot of time for books these days, but I do think in terms of the business, there's two that really helped me when I was thinking about my model. Running Lean was a great one. It's all about, because I was right into the lean startup methodology, and the book Running Lean really crystallized how you should think about developing a product and taking it to market. It's designed for online businesses, but the principles behind it, I think, are applicable anywhere, and I certainly was able to apply it to my business. So I think that was very influential for me. I really enjoyed reading the book Positioning, which is an old marketing classic as well, which was not having much background in marketing. That was a great kind of introduction to all that space. I suppose my other big one is I'm an avid New York Times reader in all the long form journalism and audio podcasts and so forth that they do. I think it's an oasis of quality in the increasingly depressing journalistic space, media space.
Excellent. Well, I'll definitely have links in the show notes to those and everything else that you've mentioned. So the last question is just some parting advice. So you've had a brilliant career with BCG. You're building a fantastic business now. What's some parting advice that you'd have for the BLG community listening to this podcast today?
I think probably make sure the market you go after makes all the difference. You've got to make sure you've got a decent market size to give you the runway to get the business going. I would advise people to stick to the lean startup principles, because that's the best way to design a service for your model, and stick at it, and know that there's many ways to make a living these days, and there's a lot of money out there to support you to do it. So if you've got a good idea and the drive to get it going, then go for it.
Brilliant. Fantastic advice. And how can people find out more about you and InLife Independent Living?
Probably the best place is our website, inlife.org.au. I'm on LinkedIn as well. But if people have got people they know who've got family or friends with a disability and are looking to think about a new service, or even if they want to find out more about their NDIS, just drop us a line. Our email address is contact@inlife.org.au, and love to talk about this stuff. So happy to help if anyone needs it.
Brilliant. Thanks, David. Well, I'll definitely, as I said, I'll have the links to those in the show notes. So really appreciate you coming on board. I know you've got lots of experience. You're really making a difference in a sector that really needs help. And I think that whole wellbeing movement, if you look from my perspective, there's been a lot of things done on basic safety, especially in the workforce. But I think the wellbeing, and certainly for those that are less privileged or, actually have, no fault of their own, some really challenges, for a brilliant business like yours to help solve those is an inspiration for all the BLG community. So I really appreciate you coming on today and sharing your wisdom.
Thanks, Paul. Very happy to.
Excellent. Great. Have a great day, David.
Thank you for listening to the Build, Live, Give show. If you found this show helpful, please share it with others so we can build businesses, live great lives, and give back to the community. If you would like to join the BLG community, go to our website, www.buildlivegive.com. Until next time, thanks for listening.